you about is social capital, which is the building block or the idea that really is all around connection and connecting people together in organizations. And I'm going to start with a story. 1985, I believe, yes, it was 1985. Ethiopia had a dreadful, dreadful famine. I don't know if you remember, thousands of people dying every day. It was a real humanitarian disaster. And once the awareness was raised, aid started to flood in to help Ethiopia. Thousands of pounds of dollars all going in, food, blankets, everything going into Ethiopia. And at the time, a scientist called Robert Cialdini noticed one strange thing. Ethiopia gave $5,000 to Mexico. Mexico had had an earthquake. There was an earthquake appeal. $5,000 went from Ethiopia, a country on its knees that desperately needed help, and they sent money to Mexico. And he wondered why. Why have they done this? And he found out, he did some research, and he found an interview from a journalist with a government minister, an Ethiopian minister. And he said, "Why did you do this?" And he said, "Well, back in the 1930s, 50 years previously, Mexico helped us. So we felt that we owed them the help." And the power of the reciprocity, the feeling that people say yes to those they owe. I owe you. I've done something for you. I feel that, if someone does something for me, I owe them. It's an incredibly powerful human response. And this forms one of the parts of this idea of social capital. The capital is almost like investment. If you create this investment in the relationships that you have with people, then you can start to have stuff happen. People will do things. And everything that we do in teams is about getting things done. So this is one of the key kind of factors around social capital. Social capital, so it's around things like participation, networks, empowerment. Reciprocity is in there, trust, support, and influence. These are all factors and feelings and emotions and things that happen when social capital starts to grow within a group of people. Okay? So what is it? Just to try and sort of give it a name, or to give you a couple of quotes that I found, which I think describe it in detail. And this is from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Just think about this. It's the links and shared values and understandings in society that enable individuals and groups to trust each other and so work together. So some of the key things here, I think, the word enable, to enable things to happen. If you can develop social capital, if that is happening, it enables other things to happen. Trust gets built. People do things and they start to work together. A society, a company is a society in its own way, or it's a country, or the globe. However way you cut the cake, you can develop these things through social capital. Another quote from Harvard, the central premise is that social capital is that social networks have value. It's the networks that have the value. Okay? It refers to the collective value of all the social networks, so who people know, and don't think of it just within your group. You connect outside your group, outside your company, outside your team as well. You have interdependent groups and different types of groups. And the inclinations that arise from these networks to do things for each other. That idea of reciprocity. And that's where the power starts to come. So I'm going to tell you another quick story. I work in Dubai in the Middle East. I've been there 8 or 9 years. There are certain challenges that they face in that part of the world that I think are harder because of the multinational nature of work and all the different people. So we really try and get people to sort of develop the social capital. And I was running a program with a Qatari oil company, mixed audience. We had Americans, Australians, Qataris, Emiratis, a whole mixed bag. About 20, I think it was 20 people. They were actually all men. There were 20 men in the room. And to kick off the day, what we did was a little bit of a fun exercise to try and develop some relationships. So we had 19 chairs in a circle facing inwards, and therefore one person doesn't get a seat. And he had to stand in the middle, and he doesn't want to be the odd one out. He wants to be sitting on a chair. So how does he get to sit on a chair? So the game that we played is he announces, the man standing up announces a fact about himself. And if you in the circle share that fact, you have to stand up. And you are not allowed to sit back down in the chair that you just stood up from. So you're going to stand up, and you're going to try and find another seat, and he's going to try and sit in your seat. So there's a lot of running around, especially if lots of people are standing up and they're all trying to sit back down in another chair. So tactically, people don't want to be stood up. They don't want to be the odd one out. So you've got to think, I want to announce something that lots of people have in common with me. And therefore you're creating these common bonds as part of this little exercise. So you might say in the Middle East, lots of people drive white cars because of the heat, they don't get dirty. So you might say, I drive a white car. Maybe 5 or 6 people out of 20 are going to stand up. Tactically, that's what you want to do. This Qatari guy stands up there, confident that he's got the fact that lots of people are going to share, and he says, I have 3 wives. Literally, and he starts looking around thinking, why is no one standing up? You have to find another fact. He stood up, no one else had 3 wives. But that's just a bit of fun, and the point is around, just sharing facts with each other, finding out about each other, and just having something in common. We feel comfort as human beings, being around people that we have things in common with. That's how social capital starts. Danny mentioned Margaret Heffernan. She's a great person to listen to and follow and read what she writes. One of the books that she wrote recently is called Beyond Measure, The Big Impact of Small Changes. She's written a fair amount of stuff and does TED Talks, and she's a CEO and advisor herself. And I just want to play a short video now that shows you her take on social capital. So I think we're going to hear that video now.
Of the bonds and loyalty and trust they develop between each other. What matters is the mortar, not just the bricks. Now, when you put all of this together, what you get is something called social capital. Social capital is the reliance and interdependency that builds trust. The term comes from sociologists who were studying communities that prove particularly resilient in times of stress. Social capital is what gives companies momentum, and social capital is what makes companies robust. What does this mean in practical terms? It means that time is everything, because social capital compounds with time. So teams that work together longer get better, because it takes time to develop the trust you need for real candor and openness.
Okay, you didn't really miss very much at the beginning. The point really there was around the glue, the mortar, the glue that sticks the walls together. This is the important thing. And social capital builds with time. Teams that stay together longer, have that time to generate those relationships, are going to be better. Now, I don't know about you, but certainly one of the feelings I have, and one of the complaints that people say is, I don't have time for anything. And this is where one of the major challenges come in with developing social capital, is we don't have that time anymore. So we have to start getting creative with ways that we can still develop it quickly. And that's the way that the world is going, and certainly the business world is going, and I'm sure you will feel that is the case. So, at this point, I just want to have you think about, why do businesses exist? We're talking about social capital here, but in the context of work and businesses, why do businesses exist? What do we do? Okay. Well, I think it's about results. It's about coming together to do something and achieve the results. And looking at revenue figures and profit figures, KPIs, numbers, and you get so focused on this. The world is running faster and faster and faster. And I think the pressure that is being put on companies and teams to succeed and do things quicker and adapt and compete and change is meaning that we're missing something. There is a gap that is potentially forming. Not for everybody. Some companies are great, others less so. About concentrating on the social capital element, the connection element of work and relationships. And we're so focused on these numbers and these results, and this is where we're going and everything else. Now, it's not our fault. It's a bit of a history lesson. It started out with the rapid change of the Industrial Revolution and going away from craftsmen and artisans who made a whole thing to efficiency and production lines like the Ford Motor Company that introduced the concept of the production line, and taking people and giving them one very specific task, very efficient. It worked, it was fantastic. Revolutionized the business world and how we did things in the 20th century. But it had the power of time, in a way. Yes, they're trying to get quicker, but you had time, you could just do that over and over and over again, and it worked. You know, it was very hierarchical. Leadership didn't trust the workers, told them what to do. All you do is you put this wheel on, you put that steering wheel in, that's it. Don't worry about anything else. You're a small cog in a big wheel. Okay? And it created silos. It created this hierarchical structure that is changing now. And the research and the evidence which we'll come on to is showing that this is going away as the world and technology, for example, is changing exponentially. So the business world now is putting new demands on teams and new demands on people, as I say, to succeed quicker and get faster and react to the market and to compete with way more companies playing in the same space. You have more power, more computing power in your phone than the Apollo rocket did that put Neil Armstrong on the moon. And these weren't around 8 years ago. Smartphones 8, 9 years ago weren't really, they were just coming in that time. They're now in everyone's pocket, yeah? Bill Clinton had access to less information than you have access to now. When he was the president of the United States in the mid-90s. You can answer any question. They say that you can answer any question within 17 minutes with the power of the internet. You know, everything is changing. The playing field is changing. Where are we heading? Where are we going with all of this? At this point, I'm going to tell you about a report that Deloitte put out every year. This is now in its 5th year. If you haven't read it, I urge you as HR professionals to read it. I think it's hugely insightful about the trends and human capital trends that are happening in the world today. Okay? They survey now, in its 5th year, 10,000 people, 10,000 professionals, mostly HR and C-suite senior level people in 140 different countries across the world. So this is a truly global impression of what is happening and where are we going. And the number one trend, and for the 2nd year running, over 90% of people have said this is either very important or important. The number one trend that they've identified is building the organization of the future. Last year it was about understanding that it was the organization of the future. This year it's getting it done, it's starting to build things. Last year it was called the rise of teams. The rise of teams, and how teamwork is changing and moving away from that 20th century silo structured way of doing things to a very new network of teams, okay? This is one quote from the report. Top companies are built around systems that encourage teams and individuals to meet each other, share information transparently, and move from team to team depending on the issues to be addressed, okay? There is agility and fluidity and movement, oiled machines that are ever changing and flexing now. You no longer have a job for life. You no longer necessarily have a speciality. You access all of this information with the different people you have at your fingertips to bring them together into different teams, and they break and move to a new team to answer a different need or a different project. This is going to start happening if it's not already happening for you. Okay? The incredible pace of change of technology. I mean, you don't have to be an expert to know it's happening. You know? There's a thing called Moore's Law, which was a term that was coined in the superconductor industry, I think in the technology industry, a number of years ago, and they're applying Moore's Law to life and technology, and it's basically an exponential doubling every year, a doubling of change. And this is why this curve is going like this in technology. AI, cloud computing, tablets, everything is changing, and businesses are missing the opportunity. There is a gap forming in the opportunity that this all presents to do things, and we're not getting on that bandwagon fast enough. And I think there's also a gap in terms of the race to get there, and we're potentially at risk of leaving behind the building blocks of good teams and companies, because we're in this pursuit of this change. Let's get on the train, it's going, we've got to get on it, let's get going, and we're missing the trick. And the warning is about forgetting about doing something with the social capital and relationships in your teams. You know, companies used to be structured like this, as I say, very, very hierarchical. this is from the Deloitte report as well, how things are moving towards how things are is this kind of idea of different teams and flexibility. And you know, I've worked with companies that are starting to adopt this. It's not going to be easy to make change. We fear change as human beings. We don't like it very much. But it takes work, it takes commitment, it takes risk and grit to sort of think, well, you know, and if you don't move with the times and make the change and expect it, you're going to be left behind, is what they're saying. And we're moving things towards an area where we have this sort of team of teams and a network of teams. And teams work when they have social capital. You know, when they have those relationships and they create that reciprocity. So you really need to work at that. Especially when people are going to come and go, I don't mean every day or every week, but maybe, you know, every year or a few months you're going to be working with different people. Companies used to look like this, and like Danny's slide earlier, they start to look a little bit more like this. More like an organism rather than a company. So what does this mean in practical terms? I'll give you an example. My wife was cabin crew for 5 years, and I've listened to her over the years talk, and you know, it would be an ideal world if airlines could have, say, 20 crew, and they go from flight to flight to flight, and they always work together, but they can't. Operationally, that doesn't work. So what happens is, you get on an aeroplane as crew, you're always working with strangers. You don't know the team around you. And we use examples like this because I like to look for real extreme ends of the spectrum examples to illustrate things. We're not looking for the standard user, we're looking for extreme examples when we try and think about examples for things. So they fall into the trap of the, I'm just going to do my job, and I call it the chicken or fish mentality. They just walk down the aisle, chicken or fish, chicken or fish. They do the job, it's okay, but it's not great. It doesn't inspire you, it doesn't make you go home and go, wow, I'd fly that airline again, they were amazing. And what happened with her, with my wife, was after 2 or 3 years, she was picked to go on some special new first-class training for a new aircraft they were bringing in. And they only did about 100, 200 people to start with, and off they went on the new aircraft. Because of that, because there were only a couple of 100 people, she started to see the same people on the flight again that she'd flown with before. Previously, new people all the time, maybe one person you'd recognize. And suddenly, 2, 3, 4 people on the flight, hi, it's you again. And she built a relationship with that person, and they had a chat, you know, and how, you know, oh, you've got kids, how's your kid? How's your, you know, how's the husband? You know, all these kind of things. Create those relationships. So she said it transformed her experience. Suddenly she looked forward to going to work. You know, oh gosh, I've got a night flight to Jeddah. Oh, but it's all right. My friend's on the flight. It's going to be okay. Her engagement went up. Her commitment, her willingness to go the extra mile. The same with all of them. You know, now sadly, airlines still struggle with this conundrum. It's very difficult. That's not going to happen, and eventually it went away again once more and more people were trained. But this is just an example of how it can work. Okay, so if we've got that gap, and we're running to the finish line, and we're thinking about we've got to get these results, we've got to make the money that we're here to make, and everything else. We're letting slip the opportunity or the requirement to work on the social capital and the teams and the bonds and everything else that we've already established of what we need. And the reason I have this picture up here is because this is a gentleman called Bill Walsh, and he was the head coach of the San Francisco 49ers American football team from about 1979 for about 10 years. They were a real mediocre, ordinary sports team. Hadn't won a Super Bowl, going nowhere, just really average. He came in, and in 10 years they won 3 Super Bowls, and they became the dream team of the 1980s. They were absolutely incredible, unstoppable, because of his philosophy and what he did with that team. And what he did is that he wrote a book about it. It was more about kind of leadership, but the principle, and the reason I bring this up is because the book that he wrote, he says, is the score takes care of itself. And the principle and why I mention this is, don't worry about the score. Yes, the score is there, the target is there. That's what we're going to try and do. We're trying to win this football game, we're trying to make this money, whatever it might be. But we've got to look after everything else first. Don't worry, just put the score aside for now. Let's work on our teams, let's work on our leadership, let's work on our learning, our connectivity, all these different things that you need to get right first. Build that trust, build that I'll do it for you because you'll do it for me, reciprocity mentality. All of that has to come. You have to focus on that, and that will lead to the results. that will lead to people deciding themselves to give more than they have done before, making a personal choice to do that because they feel part of something. Yeah? It's a very powerful concept. And when does it work? You know, when you get it right, when does social capital work? Before I do that, the neighbourhood watch system. In the UK, we have this neighbourhood watch system. It's a volunteer thing. It's in communities, villages, where you kind of look out for each other. If you're going on leave, you say to somebody that my house is going to be empty, can you keep an eye out? Anything suspicious, you report it to the coordinator. And it brings the community together a little bit, and it works in harmony with the police, and the police send information that they share amongst everybody. You put this sticker in the window of your house so people know there's neighbourhood watch in this area. And in my parents' village in the UK, there's a friend of theirs, Mary, who is an old lady. She's a widow. She lives on her own, and she's 90 years old. And the other day, a few weeks ago, there was a knock on the door, and a man was at the front door. Very nice young man. He had an official jacket and a clipboard, and he said, "Good afternoon. I'm from the electricity company. There's been some fault reported, and I need to have a look in your house." Oh, okay, so she lets him in. He says, "I need to go upstairs." He goes upstairs. He's up there for maybe 5 minutes. He comes back down and says, "I can't find the fault. I need to get some more equipment. I have to come back." So I'll come back, and he leaves. Then she starts to get a little bit suspicious, and she goes upstairs, looking around, walks into her bedroom, and on the floor of the bedroom is a jewellery box. And of course, it's empty. And he has gone through and he's stolen all her jewellery, wedding ring, everything, and is gone. Now, she calls the police, obviously. You know, the police come around. She doesn't know the police. The next thing she does is call the neighbourhood watch person. And this system, this community, kicks into life. And people come round, and that social capital is part of this network. They come around, make sure she's all right, she's very shaken. They arrange for someone to spend the night there. They start getting reports out to other people that this has happened, descriptions of the guy, his van, you know, all this kind of trickles across the community as well as the police. And that's where social capital can work. Now, they haven't caught the guy yet, but I guarantee that he won't be able to do that again in that village. And if he does try, the people are much wiser to what he's going to do. So that's the neighbourhood watch system, the neighbourhood watch logo. And when I was researching and looking for the logo online, I also found this neighbourhood watch logo. And I'd much rather have him in my neighbourhood watch society as well. The other, talking about extremes again, you know, we talked about looking for extremes. When you talk about soldiers who go to battle, of course, they are potentially making the biggest sacrifice that you can, you know, to give up your life. It's a very, very risky environment in which to work, obviously. And you always read and you hear, why do soldiers do it? Why? Why do you put yourself voluntarily at risk like that? And they don't say it's because Queen and country or the politicians told me to go. They just say, I did it for the guy next to me. Right? Because I know he would do it for me. If we're in this together. We're a brotherhood. Brothers in arms, you know. And that is a tremendously extreme example of where social capital has been built, the bonds between these guys, that transcends even family and makes them willing to make that ultimate sacrifice. Now, we're not trying to make people have that ultimate sacrifice, thank goodness for us that we work in business. But imagine if we could just get 10% of what they've got, that willingness to do things, that willingness to commit, and I help you out, and we're in this together, and when the chips are down and we're behind target, and we come together, and let's do this, let's get in the trenches and fight our way out of this together. It's a tremendous feeling. And interesting, by the way, we often use examples, as I say, from extreme user groups, military, sports teams, and why do we do that? In the context of teamwork. These guys get to spend probably 90% of their time just practicing, learning, training, practicing, experimenting, trying things out, for 10% of the time to actually do what they're paid to do. Sports teams, that kind of hour, 2 hours a week actually on the pitch. In business, flip it round and make it even more extreme. We probably spend 1% of our time experimenting, practicing, learning, bringing in new ideas on this kind of thing. And I understand, operationally we can't. And we're expected to do things live and dangerous and whilst we're at work, but we can learn from these guys. And maybe if we can spend 1 or 2% more time on doing these things, then it'll help us. Some of the things that you can do to develop that glue, okay? How can you develop that glue? Firstly, how not to do it. All right. Now, most companies have an office fridge. Yeah, everyone's got an office fridge. You put your lunch in it, your milk for your coffee or something else. I found a gallery of photographs, and here's one photograph of a note that was left in an office fridge. Good morning to whomever has been enjoying my coffee creamer all week. Surprise, you've been drinking my breast milk. Hope you've enjoyed it. Cheers. This is how not to do it. This passive aggressive, I'm not going to talk to you, I'm going to leave a note in the fridge. The person who stole the milk in the first place, what on earth is going on if there's a culture that accepts people stealing things out of the fridge? Disaster. So, how not to do it. So how can you do it? Danny talked about human eyes and the sociometric badges that people wear. This is Sandy Pentland. He's the guy at MIT who invented them. He's written a book about what he does, and he uses technology. He's using that technological capability and big data. He collects huge amounts of data. Now, I'll just skip through these because I like to put them next to each other. A poorly performing team has these inequalities, and a high-performing team has much greater equality. And this is the patterns of communication that are working across this group. Okay. The first ones, look, these two guys are not saying anything. That's why, and these guys with the yellow, they're doing all the talking or most of the talking, and they're talking to each other. He's not talking to him very much. And this was a real example. They watched this happening in this company, and this was a multinational company with different nationalities as well. And then they advised them, this is what's happening, this is what we recommend you do. You shut up a little bit, you start talking a little bit. And they came up with greater results because they were doing this. And what he said was, that we found that the patterns of communication to be the most important predictor of a team's success. Not only that, but the patterns are as significant as all of the other factors: individual intelligence, personality, skill, and the substance of discussions combined. Everything else, even the words you choose to say, are not as important as the ability to communicate and the pattern of equality of listening and talking. And for some people, God knows, it's so hard for them to listen. And other people, it's very hard to speak up. But within your teams, you've got to encourage people to share equally. If you're quieter, if you've got ideas, you have to speak up. If you're a more dominant person who tends to be very task-focused, you've got to rein yourself in a bit and start mining the rest of the team for ideas, okay? Now, one example of what he did is he went into a call center company, and I find it hard to imagine a less team-orientated role, a call center operator, just you on the phone with your customer the whole time. And they wanted to improve their results, they wanted to improve their engagement scores, and they asked Sandy to come in with his team. They wore the badges for a set period of time. They went away, looked at the data, he came back and he made 2 recommendations to this company. 2 recommendations. The first one, in their office canteen, they had a lot of little square tables where you could get 1 or 2 people only really at the table, okay? He said, make the tables one great big long table. Have great big long tables with benches so more people can sit around them together. And his second recommendation, synchronize your coffee breaks. Now you can't put everyone off, but in shifts, get them to have coffee together at the same time. That's it. That's all he said. They kind of went, really? They took a risk on his advice, but they did it. They synchronized the coffee breaks, they put big tables in. Revenue went up $15 million, and employee engagement scores went up 10%. Just by creating the opportunity for people to develop those relationships. And they're sitting there having coffees. Oh, I've got this problem, I had this customer issue, and what would you do? And they're advising and learning from each other and helping each other. Companies now have adopted this practice, and they've banned coffee on your desk. And they make you go and just have coffee with each other at certain times of the day. It's very powerful, just create that opportunity. Another quick thing is around, don't let your people feel anonymous, okay? Don't let people feel anonymous. There's nothing worse than just not being known. And this comes from Pat Lencioni, and if you're going to read one book or one author, this is a quick, easy win. The Truth About Employee Engagement, okay? And the model that he has is around 3 things. If you feel irrelevant, if you can't measure what you're doing, and if you feel anonymous, that's a miserable place to be. Okay, so in the context of social capital, I'll just focus on that anonymous factor. You just feel disconnected, you're not part of the team, no one knows me, no one knows what I like or do outside of work, and these kind of things. So it's about promoting getting to know each other. It's very simple. If you're a leader especially, this is your job, and you as HR professionals, you need to start thinking about how you're going to promote ways of people to get to know each other. Okay? Now, Abraham Lincoln, many, many different quotes from Abraham Lincoln. The one I like here is, if you ask me to cut down a tree in 8 hours, I'm going to spend 6 hours sharpening the axe. Okay? So the concept is to sharpen your axe. And my point here is about focusing and planning and preparation, especially where we've got these gaps happening and less time. You've got to focus some time and energy on this, on sharpening your axe, as it were, on getting your teams able to connect with each other. You need to spend a bit of time and money on that. It doesn't have to be a lot. We don't have time to do it like the military or the sports teams, 90% of the time. But you've just got to think about ways and how, when you can do that. And it can be some really simple things like synchronizing coffee breaks. Time. We're back to time. There's a theme here. During the Vietnam War, they studied the results of, and it was the first war where helicopters came into play, and they were able to get to casualties quite quickly in comparison to previous wars. And they noticed that if they could get to a casualty within 1 hour, they rapidly, massively increased their chance of survival. So they coined this the golden hour. The golden hour. Time's gone by, medical science has got better. They brought this down to the concept of the platinum 10 minutes. If you can get to someone within 10 minutes. And the idea is that teams have these platinum minutes. When they start working together, when they come together for the first time, it's a really important time in a team's development. So I urge you, especially if we're going to start moving towards these sort of agile, flexible teams, with people coming and changing, teams are going to move quite quickly. Use the first few moments to connect your people. Focus on the team rather than the task. It's very easy to fall into the trap of getting together in the room and go, right, what are we going to do? And here we are, we've got to get to this objective and everything else. Take a step back, even if it's a few minutes or an hour or a day. If it's a big, long project in a senior team, spend a day getting to know each other, working out things like how are we going to make decisions, how are we going to handle conflict, how are we going to do this, let alone do the task at hand, okay? Those platinum 10 minutes are really, really important. Just going back to that example about reciprocity, just a reminder about creating ways and opportunities for reciprocity. This is such a powerful human response that I'm going to do something for you, and you can't expect, if you become someone who starts giving and starts believing in this thing, start doing things for others, don't expect that that individual is going to give straight back to you. You may get lucky, they may do it straight away. It may take a year. But if everyone in your organization embraced this concept of helping, of doing things for others, then it's all going to come back in some way, shape or form. It's all going to go round and round and come back to you. And one quick, simple tip, if you do this and you do say, hey, let me help you with that. You volunteer your assistance to somebody and you say, oh, let me help you with that. And say, oh, great, thanks very much. That's really great, thank you. You respond and you say, that's okay, because I know you would do the same for me. I know you'd do the same for me. And it plants in their head, oh, yeah, I would. Next time, I will. And you can start to build this culture of reciprocity. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about is just a reminder around purpose. And I know, talking on our table, you guys are values-driven organizations and you have purpose, but don't lose sight of it. And lots of more recent research has been done around purpose isn't just, make lots of money. It's around the impact you have on other people's lives. Now, whatever you do, look for the impact that you are making. Don't just emphasize the money. Think about the impacts, the change, the positive change you can make to other people. There's a lovely quote by a Frenchman called Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. There's passion and emotion behind that statement. Don't say, right, chop that wood up, put that in here, here's the plans, here's the hammer. Yeah, okay, great. Touch them here, touch them in their hearts, and find ways to bring this idea to life in your organization. That passion, that purpose with what they want to do, okay? A quick audio clip from an interview with Margaret Heffernan again. I'm just going to play it, have a listen, because I think this really sums up this whole concept for me.
I think, you need that great connectedness between people. But I'm also really struck again, there are a large number of companies I work with, and I'll say, what's the driving goal here? And they'll say, $60 billion revenue next year. And I'd look at them and I'd say, you have got to be joking. What on earth makes you think that everybody's really going to give it their all to hit a revenue target? You know, you have to talk to something much deeper inside people than that. You have to talk to people about something that makes a difference to them every day if you want them to bring their best and do their best and feel that you've given them the opportunity to do the best work they've ever done.
Margaret Heffernan.
No, it's hugely powerful as an idea. It's so simple because it doesn't even take any work. It's just make people think about it. And you think about that. You know, if I'm trying to chase a number or I'm actually trying to help change someone's life, how much more committed am I going to be? So I'm going to leave you with 3 things to think about. If nothing else, just 3 things to remind you about what we've talked about here. The first one, remember why this is so important. Remember the difference you can make. If you get this right, the chances of your success and your happiness along the way. So remember, this is a really important thing, and don't lose sight of it as things start to speed up and we're trying to close that gap and we're trying to use technology. And think about your team. You know, think about it, why this is really, really important. Secondly, work on it. Sharpen the axe. You know, this is your job as HR people as well. It's not just your leaders and your people in your teams. Encourage this. Find ways that you can do this within your companies and within your teams. And thirdly, connect. Connect your people with each other. The human relationships, the human contact, as much face-to-face time as possible. I really, really urge that. But also connect your people to your purpose and find the right purpose, as well as just your revenue targets. And that's it. That's the end. If you need to speak to me, I'm here all day, and thank you very much for listening.